The rain fell like bullets on the cobblestone streets of Monaco, and 8-year-old Amara Washington pressed her small body against the cold iron gates of the biggest mansion she had ever seen. Her torn red jacket, once bright as summer cherries, now hung like wet rags around her thin shoulders. 3 days had passed since the foster family dropped her at that gas station, promising they would return after buying groceries. 3 days of hiding under bridges, eating scraps from trash cans, and sleeping in doorways where the police wouldn't find her. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the end of everything. Through the ornate gates, Amara could see a golden retriever sleeping peacefully in what looked like a small palace made just for dogs. The doghouse stood on perfectly manicured grass, complete with tiny windows, a red-tiled roof, and even a small porch with miniature furniture. It was bigger than the closet she had slept in at her last foster home. It was cleaner than any place she had lived in the past 2 years. The dog looked warm. The dog looked safe. The dog looked loved. Amara wiped her runny nose with the back of her hand and tasted salt from tears she didn't remember crying. Her stomach cramped with hunger so fierce it made her double over. She had tried knocking on doors throughout the wealthy neighborhood, but security guards kept shooing her away. Rich people didn't want to see dirty little girls begging for food or shelter. But this house was different. This house had a doghouse that looked like a fairy tale cottage. The front door of the mansion suddenly opened, and a tall man in an expensive gray suit stepped onto the marble porch. Even in the dim light, Amara could see he was handsome, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed too gentle for someone who owned a palace. He walked toward his car but stopped when he noticed her small figure pressed against his gate. "Hello there," he said softly, approaching slowly like she was a scared animal. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Amara's heart pounded so hard she worried it might burst from her chest. This was her chance. Her only chance. She had to be brave even though every part of her wanted to run and hide. "Mister," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Please, sir. Can I sleep in your dog's house tonight? I promise I won't hurt him. I just need somewhere warm and dry. I'll leave in the morning before anyone sees me. I won't take anything or break anything. I just need to sleep somewhere safe." The words tumbled out of her mouth like water from a broken dam. She pressed her face between the iron bars, looking up at him with desperate brown eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. The man's expression changed instantly. His mouth opened slightly and she saw something that looked like pain cross his features. He stared at her for a long moment, and Amara prepared herself for rejection. Everyone always said no. Everyone always walked away. "What's your name, beautiful girl?" he asked instead. "Amara Washington, sir. I'm 8 years old and I'm very good. I don't cause trouble, I promise. I just need one night in the doghouse. Please." The man knelt down so they were at eye level through the gate. Rain soaked through his expensive suit, but he didn't seem to care. "Amara, my name is Harrison Bennett. This is my house and that's my dog Winston over there." He paused, studying her face carefully. "When did you last eat, sweetheart?" Amara tried to remember. Time felt blurry when you were hungry and tired and scared. "Maybe yesterday? Or the day before. I found some bread behind a bakery, but it was hard and kind of green." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Where are your parents, Amara?" "Dead, sir. Car crash when I was 6. I've been with foster families since then, but..." She trailed off, not wanting to explain how the last family had gotten tired of her and driven away, leaving her standing alone at a gas station with nothing but the clothes on her back. "And where did you sleep last night?" "Under a bridge near the harbor. But it's okay, sir. I'm used to it now. I just thought maybe your doghouse would be warmer. I promise Winston won't mind. Dogs like me. I'm good with animals. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you saw a child in desperate need? This story will challenge everything you think you know about compassion and family. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think Harrison should do next." Harrison stood up slowly, his heart breaking with every word this little girl spoke. No child should ever have to beg to sleep in a doghouse. No child should know what it felt like to be abandoned and forgotten. "Amara," he said gently, "I have a better idea. Would you like to come inside my house instead? You can have a hot meal, a warm bath, and sleep in a real bed tonight." Amara's eyes went wide with disbelief. "Really? You mean it? You're not just being nice and then you'll change your mind." "I mean it completely. Let me open this gate and bring you inside where you belong." As Harrison pressed the button to open the electronic gates, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, her luck was finally changing. The gates swung open with a soft hum, and Harrison held out his hand. Amara looked at it for a moment, then slowly reached out and placed her small, cold fingers in his warm palm. He squeezed gently and she felt safer than she had in months. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mr. Bennett." "Call me Harrison," he said, leading her toward the mansion's front door. "And Amara, you never have to thank me for treating you with kindness. That's just what people should do for each other." As they walked up the marble steps together, Winston the golden retriever bounded over to greet them, his tail wagging furiously. He seemed to sense that Amara needed comfort because he immediately pressed against her legs, offering warmth and affection. Amara looked up at the massive front door, then back at Harrison. "Are you sure this is okay? I don't want to get you in trouble." Harrison smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "Amara, you're not getting me in trouble. You're giving me the chance to do something right. Something important. Something that matters." He opened the door and warm light spilled onto the porch. Inside, Amara could see marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and more luxury than she had ever imagined. But more importantly, she could see kindness in Harrison's eyes and feel safety in his presence. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Harrison said softly. And for the first time in 2 years, Amara Washington felt like she might actually belong somewhere. The warmth inside Harrison's mansion hit Amara like a gentle wave. She stood in the enormous foyer, dripping rainwater onto the pristine marble floor, her eyes wide as she took in the crystal chandelier hanging above them like a cluster of fallen stars. Everything gleamed and sparkled, from the polished wooden staircases that curved gracefully toward the second floor to the artwork that decorated the cream-colored walls. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, turning in a slow circle. "This place is like a castle." Harrison watched her reaction with a mixture of amusement and heartbreak. When had he last noticed the beauty of his own home? When had he last felt wonder at anything? This little girl, who had been sleeping under bridges and eating moldy bread, was showing him how to see magic again. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Harrison called out, his voice echoing through the spacious halls. "Could you please join us in the foyer?" Within moments, a woman in her 50s appeared, wearing a spotless white uniform and a concerned expression. Elena Rodriguez had worked for Harrison for 8 years, and she knew him well enough to recognize when something important was happening. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like you to meet Amara Washington. She'll be staying with us tonight and probably for several more nights after that." Harrison placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. "She needs a hot meal, warm clothes, and a safe place to sleep." Mrs. Rodriguez took one look at Amara's soaked appearance and thin frame, and her maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. "Of course, Mr. Bennett. Come with me, sweetheart. Let's get you cleaned up and fed." Amara looked back at Harrison nervously. "You'll still be here when I come back down, right? You won't leave while I'm gone?" The question pierced Harrison's heart. How many times had this child been abandoned by adults who were supposed to protect her? How many promises had been broken in her short life? "I promise I'll be right here waiting for you," he said solemnly. "In fact, I'll be in the kitchen helping Mrs. Rodriguez prepare your dinner. Does that sound good?" Amara nodded, some of the tension leaving her small shoulders. She followed Mrs. Rodriguez up the sweeping staircase, her hand trailing along the smooth banister. In the guest bedroom, Mrs. Rodriguez ran a warm bath while Amara sat on the edge of the enormous bed, still hardly believing this was real. The bedroom was bigger than most apartments she had lived in, with tall windows that looked out over the mansion's gardens and a bathroom that sparkled like something from a movie. "Let's get you out of these wet clothes, Menina," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. "I found some things that might fit you." She held up a soft blue dress with white trim, along with warm socks and clean underwear. "These belonged to my daughter when she was your age. She's grown up now with children of her own, but I kept some of her favorite clothes." "It's so pretty," Amara said, touching the fabric reverently. "Are you sure it's okay for me to wear it? I don't want to mess it up." "Clothes are meant to be worn by beautiful little girls," Mrs. Rodriguez replied firmly. "And you, sweetheart, are absolutely beautiful." While Amara soaked in the warm bath, washing away days of dirt and fear, Mrs. Rodriguez gathered her wet clothes. The red jacket was torn in several places, and her jeans had holes in both knees. Her shoes were worn through at the soles. This child had been through more hardship than most adults. Downstairs in the kitchen, Harrison was making phone calls. First to his lawyer, then to a private investigator, then to the best child psychologist in Monaco. He had no idea what the legal implications were of taking in a homeless child, but he knew he couldn't let Amara go back to the streets. When Amara appeared in the kitchen doorway 30 minutes later, Harrison barely recognized her. Clean and dressed in the blue dress, With her hair neatly combed and her face glowing from the warm bath, she looked like a completely different child. She was beautiful, with intelligent dark eyes and a shy smile that made his chest tight with emotion. "I feel like a princess," she said quietly, smoothing down the skirt of the blue dress. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Rodriguez. I've never worn anything this nice before." "You look like a princess too," Harrison said, meaning every word. "Are you hungry? Mrs. Rodriguez has prepared quite a feast." The kitchen island was loaded with food: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread rolls, and a large glass of milk. Amara's eyes went wide at the sight of so much food. "All of this is for me?" she asked in disbelief. "Every bite," Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed, pulling out a chair for her. "And there's chocolate cake for dessert if you have room." Amara climbed onto the chair and stared at the plate in front of her. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up the fork. "I don't know how to thank you both. This is the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me." "You don't need to thank us," Harrison said, sitting down beside her with his own plate. "This is what families do for each other. They take care of one another." "Families?" Amara repeated the word like she was tasting something rare and precious. "I don't really remember what that feels like." As she ate, Harrison asked gentle questions about her life. He learned that her parents had died in a car accident on Christmas Eve 2 years ago. She had been bounced between 4 different foster homes since then, each one worse than the last. The most recent family had told her they were just stopping for groceries, then never returned. "I waited at that gas station for 6 hours, Amara said between bites of mashed potatoes. "I kept thinking they would come back, that maybe they just forgot where they left me. But then it got dark and I realized they weren't coming." Harrison's hands clenched into fists under the table. How could anyone abandon a child like that? How could anyone look into those trusting brown eyes and then drive away forever? "Amara," he said carefully, "would you like to stay here with us while we figure out what to do next? I know this is all very sudden, but I think we could take good care of you." Amara stopped eating and looked up at him with tears shimmering in her eyes. "You really mean that? You want me to stay here?" "I would be honored to have you stay here," Harrison replied honestly. "This house has been very quiet and lonely. I think it needs the sound of a little girl's laughter." "Yes," Amara said immediately, her voice filled with gratitude and relief. "Yes, please. I would love to stay here with you and Mrs. Rodriguez. I promise I'll be good. I'll help with chores and I won't break anything and I'll be very quiet." "Sweetheart," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently, "you don't have to be quiet. Children are supposed to laugh and play and make noise. That's what makes a house feel like a home." Harrison felt something shift in his chest as he watched Amara finish her dinner. For the first time in years, his mansion felt warm and alive. This little girl had brought something precious into his world, something he hadn't even realized was missing. After dinner, they sat in the living room by the fireplace. Winston curled up next to Amara on the sofa, and she stroked his golden fur while Harrison told her stories about his travels around the world. Her eyes grew heavy as the warmth and safety finally allowed her body to relax. "Mr. Harrison," she said sleepily, "is this real? Or am I going to wake up under that bridge again?" Harrison leaned over and gently brushed a curl away from her forehead. "This is completely real, sweetheart. You're safe now. You're home." Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Amara's bedroom, creating golden patterns on the carpet. She woke up slowly, confused for a moment about where she was. The bed was so soft, the room so quiet and peaceful. Then she remembered Harrison's mansion, Mrs. Rodriguez's kindness, the promise that she could stay. She had slept for 12 hours straight. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Good morning, sunshine," Mrs. Rodriguez called out. "Are you ready for breakfast?" Amara sat up in bed, still wearing the blue dress from the night before. She had been afraid to take it off, worried that when she woke up, all of this would disappear like a dream. "Coming?" she called back, her voice still thick with sleep. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. The girl looking back at her seemed different somehow. Cleaner, yes, but also hopeful. When had she last looked at herself and seen hope instead of fear? Downstairs, Harrison was already in the kitchen, dressed in a navy suit and reading financial reports on his tablet. He looked up when she appeared and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Amara. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in 2 years," she admitted, climbing onto the same chair she had sat in the night before. "The bed is like sleeping on a cloud." Mrs. Rodriguez placed a plate in front of her loaded with pancakes, bacon, and fresh strawberries. "Eat up, sweetheart. Mr. Bennett has some things he wants to discuss with you." Amara looked at Harrison nervously. "Am I in trouble?" Did I do something wrong? Not at all, Harrison assured her quickly. I've been making some phone calls this morning about getting you enrolled in school and finding out more about your family situation. But first, I want to ask you something important. He set aside his tablet and gave her his full attention. Amara, would you like me to try to find your biological family? Grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone who might be looking for you. Amara chewed thoughtfully on a piece of pancake. I had a grandmother on my mom's side. Her name was Ruby Washington. She lived in Georgia somewhere. But after the accident, the social workers said they couldn't find her. Maybe they didn't look hard enough, Harrison suggested. I know some very good investigators who specialize in finding people. Would you like me to have them search for your grandmother? Yes, please, Amara said immediately, then paused. But what if she doesn't want me either? What if she's too old to take care of a kid, or what if she doesn't have enough money? What if she sends me back to foster care? Harrison reached across the table and took her small hand in his. Amara, even if we find your grandmother, you will always have a place here with us. That's a promise. You're part of our family now, no matter what happens. The gratitude in her eyes was almost overwhelming. Thank you, she whispered. I don't understand why you're being so kind to me, but thank you. After breakfast, Harrison took her shopping for clothes. The department store in downtown Monaco was unlike anything Amara had ever experienced. She walked through the children's section with wide eyes, touching soft fabrics and admiring bright colors. Pick out whatever you like, Harrison told her. You need clothes for school, play clothes, and something nice for special occasions. Amara was overwhelmed by the choices. She gravitated toward a green dress with yellow flowers, then a red sweater, then a pair of blue jeans that actually fit properly. When the salesperson suggested matching accessories, Amara looked at Harrison nervously. Is that too much? I don't want to spend all your money. Harrison laughed, the sound rich and warm. Sweetheart, buying you clothes makes me happier than any money I've ever spent on myself. Please, choose whatever makes you feel beautiful. By the time they finished shopping, Amara had 3 bags full of new clothes, shoes, and a backpack for school. In the car on the way home, she sat quietly, fingering the fabric of her new green dress. Penny for your thoughts, Harrison said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is all a mistake, she admitted. That I have to give everything back and go live somewhere awful again. Good things don't usually happen to me. Harrison pulled the car over and turned to face her. Amara, listen to me very carefully. You are not a mistake. You are not a burden. You are a blessing, and anyone who doesn't see that is the one making the mistake. You deserve good things. You deserve kindness and love and beautiful clothes and a warm bed and people who care about you. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks, but for the first time in years they were happy tears. That afternoon, Harrison's private investigator called with news. He had found Ruby Washington living in a small town in Georgia. She was alive, healthy, and had been searching for Amara ever since the accident. She never stopped looking for you, Harrison told Amara as they sat in his study. She hired her own investigator, but she didn't have the resources to do a thorough search. She's been calling social services offices across the country for 2 years. Amara's hands trembled as Harrison dialed her grandmother's number. When a voice answered on the third ring, warm and familiar despite the years that had passed, Amara burst into tears. Grandma Ruby? It's me. It's Amara. The conversation that followed was filled with tears, laughter, and so much love that even Harrison found himself wiping his eyes. Ruby Washington had indeed been searching desperately for her granddaughter. She had petitioned the courts, contacted every agency she could think of, and never given up hope. Baby girl, Ruby's voice crackled through the speakerphone, I have been praying for this day every single night. Where are you, sweet child? Are you safe? Are you being treated well? I'm in Monaco with a very kind man named Harrison Bennett, Amara explained, looking at Harrison gratefully. He saved me, Grandma. He brought me into his house and bought me new clothes, and he's taking care of me. Mr. Bennett, Ruby's voice grew formal and respectful. I cannot begin to thank you for protecting my grandbaby. How can I repay such kindness? Mrs. Washington, there's no need for repayment, Harrison replied. Amara is a remarkable little girl. Taking care of her has been my privilege. They talked for over an hour, making plans for Ruby to visit Monaco as soon as possible. Harrison offered to pay for her flight, and after some gentle persuasion, Ruby accepted with tearful gratitude. That evening, as Amara got ready for bed in her new pajamas, she found Harrison sitting on her bedroom balcony, looking out over the Mediterranean Sea. Can't sleep? She asked, joining him in the chair next to his. I was thinking about tomorrow, he admitted. You start school and I have to go back to work. I'm worried about leaving you, even though Mrs. Rodriguez will be here. I'm scared too, Amara confessed. What if the other kids don't like me? What if they ask questions I don't want to answer? Harrison turned to look at her, this brave little girl who had survived so much. You know what I've learned in business, Amara? The most successful people are the ones who face their fears and do the right thing anyway. You're already braver than most adults I know. Will you tell me about your work? She asked. I want to understand what you do. As Harrison explained his business empire, hotels and real estate developments around the world, Amara listened with the intensity of someone much older than 8. She asked smart questions and made observations that surprised him with their insight. Maybe someday I could work with you, she suggested. After I finish school and college. I would love that, Harrison replied and meant it completely. Bennett Enterprises could use someone with your intelligence and heart. As they sat together under the stars, both of them felt something they had been missing for years, the comfort of family. Not the family you're born with, but the family you choose and create through love and commitment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were both exactly where they belonged. Harrison's private investigator, Thomas Chin, was the best in the business at finding people who didn't want to be found. But finding someone who desperately wanted to be found proved to be even more rewarding. Within 48 hours of starting his search for Ruby Washington, Thomas had compiled a complete file on Amara's grandmother. Ruby Washington, age 68, lived in a small house on Maple Street in Valdosta, Georgia. She worked part-time at the local library and volunteered at her church every Sunday. She had been married to Amara's grandfather for 45 years until his death 3 years ago from cancer. She had one daughter, Amara's mother Diane, who had died in the car accident along with Amara's father Michael. Most importantly, Ruby Washington had never stopped searching for her granddaughter. She's filed missing person reports in 12 different states, Thomas explained to Harrison over the phone. She's contacted hundreds of foster care agencies, hired 2 different investigators before me, and even started a blog dedicated to finding Amara. She has flyers posted all over Georgia and Florida with Amara's picture. Harrison looked at the photographs Thomas had sent to his computer. Ruby was a small, dignified woman with graying hair and kind eyes that looked remarkably similar to Amara's. In every photo, she was holding a picture of Amara as a 6-year-old, taken just months before the accident. There's something else, Thomas continued. Ruby Washington has been sending letters to the Department of Children's Services every month for 2 years, begging them to let her take custody of Amara. She's been denied repeatedly because she didn't have the financial resources they required for legal representation. Harrison's jaw tightened with anger. A loving grandmother had been kept from her granddaughter because she couldn't afford expensive lawyers? While Amara was being bounced between uncaring foster families, her own blood relative had been fighting desperately to bring her home. Get me copies of all those letters, Harrison instructed. And Thomas, I want you to find out exactly which officials were responsible for those denials. Someone needs to be held accountable. When Harrison shared this information with Amara that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework. Her new school uniform, a crisp white shirt and green jumper, made her look like any other happy, well-cared-for child. It was hard to believe that just 1 week ago she had been sleeping under bridges. My grandma never gave up looking for me? Amara asked, her voice filled with wonder. Never, Harrison confirmed. Thomas showed me her blog. She posts something every single day. Photos of you, memories of your parents, prayers asking God to keep you safe and bring you home. Tears welled up in Amara's eyes. I thought maybe she had forgotten about me. Or that she didn't want to take care of a kid. I thought that's why nobody came to get me after the accident. Your grandmother has wanted you every single day since your parents died, Harrison said gently. The system failed both of you. But we're going to fix that now. The next morning, Harrison made a series of phone calls that would change everything. First, he called his team of lawyers and instructed them to begin immediate custody proceedings. Then he called Ruby Washington directly. Mrs. Washington, this is Harrison Bennett. We spoke the other day about Amara. Oh, Mr. Bennett, Ruby's voice was warm but tired. How is my grandbaby? Is she settling in well with you? She's doing wonderfully. She's smart, funny, and incredibly brave. But Mrs. Washington, I want to talk to you about something important. I understand you've been trying to gain custody of Amara for the past 2 years. There was a long pause. Yes, sir, I have. But the lawyers keep telling me I need money I don't have. They say I'm too old, that I don't make enough at the library, that my house is too small. I don't understand why loving her isn't enough. Harrison's heart ached for this woman who had been kept from her granddaughter by bureaucratic nonsense. "Mrs. Washington, what if I told you that I could help with the legal fees? What if I could ensure that you and Amara are reunited properly, through the courts, so that no one can ever separate you again?" "Mr. Bennett, I couldn't possibly ask you to pay for lawyers. You've already done so much by taking care of her." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Actually, I'm insisting. Amara loves you and you love her. Family should be together." Ruby was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you doing this for us? You don't even know us." Harrison looked out his office window at the garden where Amara was playing with Winston, her laughter carrying on the warm afternoon breeze. "Mrs. Washington, that little girl saved my life in ways she'll never understand. Helping her find her way back to you is the least I can do." Within hours, Harrison's legal team was in contact with Ruby's court-appointed attorney. What had seemed impossible suddenly became simple when backed by unlimited resources and lawyers who knew how to navigate the system. 3 days later, Ruby Washington stepped off a plane at Monaco's airport, carrying a worn suitcase and a heart full of hope. Harrison had offered to send his private jet to collect her, but Ruby had politely declined, accepting only the commercial airline ticket he insisted on purchasing. Amara waited in the airport terminal, practically vibrating with nervous energy. She wore her favorite new dress, the green one with yellow flowers, and clutched a bouquet of daisies they had picked from Harrison's garden. "What if she doesn't recognize me?" Amara worried aloud. "I've grown a lot in 2 years. What if I look different?" "Sweetheart," Harrison said gently, "grandmothers always recognize their granddaughters. Love has a way of seeing past time and change." When Ruby Washington emerged from the customs area, moving slowly with the help of a walking cane, Amara's doubts vanished instantly. This was definitely her grandmother, with the same warm smile and gentle eyes she remembered from childhood visits. "Grandma Ruby," Amara called out, her voice breaking with emotion. Ruby looked up and her face crumpled with joy. "Amara, baby girl. Come here to your grandma." They met in the middle of the busy terminal, grandmother and granddaughter holding each other like they never wanted to let go again. Other travelers smiled as they passed, moved by the obvious love between the elderly woman and the little girl. "I never stopped believing I would find you," Ruby whispered into Amara's hair. "Not for one single day." "I dreamed about you," Amara replied, her voice muffled against her grandmother's shoulder. "I dreamed that you were looking for me, but I didn't think it was real." Harrison watched the reunion from a respectful distance, his own eyes damp with unshed tears. This was why he had made his fortune, he realized. Not for the luxury or the power, but for moments like this when money could be used to repair what was broken, to heal what was hurt. On the drive back to the mansion, Ruby marveled at the beauty of Monaco while holding Amara's hand tightly, as if afraid her granddaughter might disappear again. "Mr. Bennett," Ruby said from the back seat, "I need you to know how grateful I am. Not just for finding Amara but for taking such good care of her. She looks healthy and happy and loved." "She's been a joy to have in my home," Harrison replied honestly. "She's brought more happiness into my life than I knew was possible." That evening, they sat in Harrison's living room as Ruby shared stories about Amara's parents. She showed photographs of Diane and Michael, young and in love, laughing at their wedding, holding baby Amara in the hospital. "Your mama was just like you," Ruby told Amara, pointing to a picture of Diane at age 8. "Smart as a whip and stubborn as a mule. She would have been so proud of how strong and brave you've become." As the night grew later, they discussed the practical matters. Ruby's small house in Valdosta, her job at the library, the life she had built in Georgia. Harrison's mansion in Monaco, his business empire, the opportunities he could provide for Amara's education. "I want what's best for Amara," Ruby said finally. "Even if that means she stays here with you." "And I want what's best for Amara too," Harrison replied. "Which is why I think we need to find a solution that doesn't require anyone to choose." As grandmother and granddaughter curled up together on the sofa, both of them finally complete after 2 years of searching and longing, Harrison began to formulate a plan that would change all their lives forever. Ruby Washington's first morning in Harrison's mansion began before dawn. Years of working at the library had trained her to wake early, and jet lag made sleep impossible anyway. She sat by the window in her guest bedroom, watching the sun rise over the Mediterranean Sea and trying to process the surreal circumstances of her life. 3 days ago she had been in Valdosta, eating breakfast alone in her small kitchen, wondering if she would ever see her granddaughter again. Now she was in Monaco, in a palace that belonged in fairy tales, reunited with the child she had thought was lost forever. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Grandma Ruby? Are you awake? Amara's voice called out tentatively. Come in, baby girl, Ruby replied, opening her arms as Amara rushed across the room in her purple pajamas. They held each other in the golden morning light, still hardly believing they were together again. Ruby studied Amara's face, marveling at how much she had grown, how healthy she looked, how the fear and sadness had been replaced by confidence and joy. You look so much like your mama when she was your age, Ruby said, stroking Amara's hair. Same beautiful eyes, same stubborn chin. Tell me about her, Amara requested, settling into the chair beside her grandmother. I remember some things but they're getting fuzzy. Ruby's face softened with memory. Your mama was the light of my world from the day she was born. She was curious about everything, always asking questions, always reading books. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. Like Miss Thompson at my new school? Exactly like that. She would have loved knowing that you have such a good teacher now. They talked for an hour, Ruby sharing stories about Diane's childhood while Amara soaked up every detail. When Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with breakfast, Ruby insisted on helping in the kitchen despite the housekeeper's protests. I don't sit idle while others work, Ruby said firmly, rolling up the sleeves of her simple blue dress. These hands know how to cook and clean, and I intend to earn my keep. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled warmly. Mrs. Washington, you are a guest in this house. Mr. Bennett would be horrified if he knew you were working. Then we won't tell him, Ruby replied with a wink that made both women laugh. When Harrison appeared for breakfast, he found Ruby and Mrs. Rodriguez working side by side, preparing pancakes and bacon while Amara set the table. The scene was so domestic, so naturally warm, that he paused in the doorway to absorb it. Good morning, ladies, he said, entering the kitchen with a smile. Something smells incredible. Your Mrs. Rodriguez is teaching me how to make pancakes the way Amara likes them, Ruby explained, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. Light and fluffy with just a touch of vanilla. Grandma Ruby makes the best biscuits in all of Georgia, Amara announced proudly. She promised to teach Mrs. Rodriguez her secret recipe. Over breakfast, Harrison shared his tentative plans for the custody arrangements. His lawyers were confident they could have Ruby declared Amara's legal guardian within a month, but he wanted to discuss living arrangements. Mrs. Washington, I know you have a life in Georgia, he began carefully. Your job, your church, your friends. I don't want to ask you to give up everything you've built there. Ruby set down her fork and looked at him seriously. Mr. Bennett, I've been thinking about this all night. You've given Amara opportunities one could never provide. The best schools, travel, experiences that could shape her entire future. How can I take her away from all that to live in a two-bedroom house where I struggle to pay the electric bill each month? Grandma, Amara said quickly, I don't care about big houses or fancy schools. I just want to be with family. And you will be, Harrison assured her. But I have an idea that might work for everyone if you're both open to it. He explained his proposal. He would purchase a large house in Valdosta, close to Ruby's church and community, where both Ruby and Amara could live. He would also establish offices there for his company, allowing him to spend significant time in Georgia while maintaining his international business. Amara could attend excellent schools in Georgia while still having access to educational opportunities around the world during school breaks. You want to move to Georgia? For us? Ruby asked in disbelief. Mrs. Washington, I've spent the last 15 years building a business empire, traveling constantly, living in hotels and empty houses. I've been successful by every measure except the one that actually matters. I've been lonely. Harrison looked at Amara, then at Ruby. These past 2 weeks with Amara have been the happiest of my adult life. If I can create a life where we're all together, where Amara has both her grandmother and the educational opportunities she deserves, then that's what I want to do. Ruby was quiet for a long moment, processing this incredible offer. Mr. Bennett, I can't let you uproot your entire life for us. That's too much to ask. You're not asking. I'm choosing. There's a difference. But what about your business here? Your home? Your life in Monaco? Harrison gestured around the mansion. This place has been more like a museum than a home. Beautiful but cold. Expensive but empty. I want to live somewhere that feels warm and alive, somewhere that matters. Amara looked between the two adults, her heart full of hope but afraid to believe such perfect happiness was possible. That afternoon, Harrison's assistant arranged a video conference with real estate agents in Valdosta. They spent hours looking at properties online, Ruby pointing out neighborhoods she knew, schools she recommended, churches where she felt comfortable. There, Ruby said, pointing to a beautiful Victorian house with a wraparound porch and large yard. That one looks like a home where a little girl could be happy. It's perfect, Amara agreed, imagining herself playing in that big yard, reading books on that sunny porch. Harrison made an offer on the house that same day. In the evening they walked through Monaco's old town, Ruby marveling at the narrow streets and ancient buildings while Amara pointed out her favorite spots from the past 2 weeks. Other tourists stopped to photograph the picturesque scene: an elderly African-American woman in a simple dress, a well-dressed businessman, and a little girl in a bright green sundress, all clearly family despite their different backgrounds. People are staring, Ruby observed quietly. They're staring because they see something beautiful, Harrison replied. 3 people who belonged together, who found each other against impossible odds. That night, as Ruby tucked Amara into bed in the mansion's guest room, they both felt a peace they hadn't experienced in years. "Grandma, are you really going to let Mr. Harrison buy us a house in Georgia?" Amara asked sleepily. "I think I am, baby girl. It feels right, doesn't it? Like maybe this is what your mama and daddy would have wanted for us." "I think they're happy," Amara agreed. "I think they sent Mr. Harrison to take care of both of us." Ruby kissed her granddaughter's forehead and settled into the chair beside the bed, planning to watch over her sleep as she had dreamed of doing for 2 long years. Down the hall, Harrison sat in his study, finalizing arrangements for their new life in Georgia. For the first time since his own childhood, he was planning a future based on love instead of profit, on family instead of business success. Outside, the Mediterranean Sea sparkled under the stars, beautiful but no longer home. Home was wherever Amara and Ruby would be, wherever this unexpected family could grow and thrive together. What would you do if someone offered to completely change their life for your happiness? This story keeps getting more incredible and you won't believe what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the amazing conclusion, and tell me in the comments whether you think Ruby should accept Harrison's generous offer. The legal meeting took place in Harrison's study on a Tuesday morning, with lawyers participating via video conference from 3 different countries. Ruby sat in a leather chair that made her feel very small, while Amara played quietly with Winston on the carpet nearby. The child didn't fully understand the complexities being discussed, but she sensed the importance of every word. James Morrison, Harrison's lead attorney, appeared on the main screen wearing his customary serious expression. "Mrs. Washington, the custody petition is proceeding smoothly. However, there are some complications we need to address." Ruby straightened her shoulders, preparing herself for bad news. "What kind of complications?" "The state of Georgia has specific requirements for guardianship cases involving interstate custody transfers. Because Amara was placed in foster care in Florida, and you're a resident of Georgia seeking custody of a child currently residing in Monaco, we need to satisfy multiple jurisdictions." Harrison leaned forward. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means the process will take longer than we hoped," Morrison explained. "Potentially 6 to 8 months instead of the 4 to 6 weeks we originally anticipated. During that time, Amara will need to remain in a stable living situation with established guardianship." Ruby felt her heart sink. She had already taken extended leave from her job at the library, using up vacation time she had been saving for years. She couldn't afford to stay in Monaco for months, but she also couldn't bear the thought of leaving Amara again. "There's another issue," Morrison continued. "The courts want to ensure that any custody arrangement is in Amara's best interests from both educational and financial perspectives. They've requested detailed reports about her current schooling, healthcare, and living conditions." "Her current situation is excellent," Ruby said firmly. "Mr. Bennett has provided her with everything a child could need." "That's actually part of the complication," Morrison replied delicately. "The courts want to understand why a child would be moved from a situation of considerable privilege to more modest circumstances. They need assurance that the change serves her interests, not just family preferences." Amara looked up from where she was brushing Winston's fur. "What does that mean? Are they saying I can't live with Grandma Ruby?" Harrison moved to sit on the floor beside her. "They're not saying that, sweetheart. They just want to make sure any decision we make is the best thing for your future." But Ruby understood the implication. The courts were questioning whether an elderly woman living on a library employee's salary could provide adequately for a child who was currently receiving private education, luxury healthcare, and unlimited opportunities. After the conference ended, Ruby sat quietly in the garden while Amara attended her afternoon tutoring session. Harrison found her there an hour later, staring at the Mediterranean Sea with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Washington? Are you all right?" "I don't know how to compete with all this," she said, gesturing at the mansion, the gardens, the obvious wealth surrounding them. How do I convince a judge that my little house in Valdosta is better for Amara than a palace in Monaco? Harrison sat down beside her on the garden bench. You don't have to compete. We're on the same side here. Are we? Ruby asked, looking at him directly. Mr. Bennet, I see how much you love her. I see how happy she is here. Maybe the courts are right. Maybe I'm being selfish wanting to take her away from opportunities one could never give her. Mrs. Washington, love isn't selfish. Love is what saved Amara when the system failed her. Love is what kept you searching when everyone told you to give up. Love is what matters most in a child's life. Ruby wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. But love doesn't pay for college tuition or medical emergencies or all the things a child needs to succeed in this world. That's where my proposal comes in, Harrison reminded her. The house in Georgia, the educational trust fund I want to establish, the medical insurance I can provide. You don't have to choose between love and security. We can give her both. But why would you do all that? Really, Mr. Bennet? I need to understand your motivations. Harrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When I was Amara's age, I was in foster care too. Different circumstances, but the same feeling of being unwanted, of belonging nowhere. I was adopted eventually by a wealthy family, but they saw me as a project, not a son. I had every material advantage, but I never felt loved. Ruby's expression softened. Oh, Mr. Bennet. I don't want Amara to have to choose between love and opportunity the way I did. I want her to have both. I want her to know she's cherished while also knowing she has the resources to achieve anything she dreams of. That evening at dinner, Amara seemed to sense the tension between the adults. Is everything okay? You all look worried. Ruby took her granddaughter's hand. Baby girl, we need to talk about some grown-up things. The lawyers say it might take several more months before I can officially become your guardian. Months? Amara's eyes widened with alarm. Does that mean you have to go back to Georgia without me? I don't know, sweetheart. I can't afford to stay here that long, but I don't want to leave you either. What if I come with you now? Amara suggested. We could go home to Georgia and let the lawyers figure everything out from there. Harrison and Ruby exchanged glances. They had both considered this option, but there were legal complications with taking Amara out of Monaco before the custody issues were resolved. It's not that simple, Harrison explained gently. The courts need to approve any changes to your living situation while the custody case is pending. So we're stuck, Amara said, her voice small and disappointed. Not stuck, Ruby corrected. Just figuring things out. The next morning brought unexpected news. Morrison called to inform them that a family court judge in Georgia had agreed to an expedited hearing if all parties could appear in person within 2 weeks. It was an opportunity to fast-track the custody proceedings, but it meant everyone would need to travel to Valdosta. The judge wants to see Amara's current living environment and educational progress, Morrison explained. She also wants to interview all parties involved in the proposed custody arrangement. Harrison immediately began making travel arrangements while Ruby worried about returning to her small town with a billionaire businessman in tow. What would her neighbors think? How would she explain this unprecedented situation? Mrs. Washington, Harrison said, sensing her anxiety, I know this is overwhelming. We'll take everything one step at a time. It's not that, Ruby admitted. I'm worried about what happens after the judge makes her decision. If she awards me custody, where does that leave you? You've been more of a father to Amara these past months than anyone else ever has. Harrison felt a tightness in his chest. The truth was, he had been avoiding thinking about what would happen if Ruby gained full custody and wanted to raise Amara independently. The thought of losing this child who had become the center of his world was almost unbearable. I just want what's best for Amara, he said finally. So do I, Ruby replied. That's what makes this so complicated. That afternoon, as they prepared for the trip to Georgia, Amara made a decision that surprised everyone. She sat both adults down in the living room and spoke with a maturity that belied her 8 years. I love you both, she began, looking from Harrison to Ruby. Grandma Ruby, you're my family, my blood, and I've missed you every single day. Mr. Harrison, you saved my life and showed me what it feels like to be truly cared for. She paused, gathering her courage. I don't want to choose between you. I want us all to be a family together. I know it's complicated and maybe unusual, but couldn't we make it work somehow? Ruby and Harrison looked at each other, seeing their own hopes reflected in the other's eyes. Maybe the solution wasn't choosing sides. Maybe the solution was redefining what family could look like. What if we tried? Harrison said quietly. What if we went to Georgia and presented the judge with a plan where Amara gets to keep both of us? Ruby smiled through her tears. I think that sounds perfect. Outside, the Monaco sun was setting over the Mediterranean, but inside the mansion, a new kind of family was beginning to take shape. The flight to Georgia was Amara's first time on Harrison's private jet, and she pressed her face to the window as they descended over the familiar landscape of her grandmother's home state. The red clay soil and pine forests looked different from Monaco's rocky coastline and azure waters, but they looked like home in a way that made her heart skip with anticipation. Ruby gripped the armrests of her leather seat as the plane touched down at Valdosta Regional Airport. She had lived in this town for 40 years, but she had never imagined returning with a billionaire and his private jet. What would people say? How would she explain this situation to her church friends and neighbors? Nervous? Harrison asked gently, noticing her tense posture. Terrified, Ruby admitted. This isn't how I pictured bringing my granddaughter home. Harrison understood her anxiety. He was equally nervous about being judged by Ruby's community, about whether he would fit into her world the way she and Amara had fit into his. The rental car journey through Valdosta's tree-lined streets felt like traveling back in time. Harrison had grown up in similar small towns before his adoption, but he had forgotten the pace of life where people waved from their front porches and children rode bicycles without supervision. There's the library where I work, Ruby pointed out as they passed a brick building with wide front steps. And that's First Baptist Church where your mama was baptized, she told Amara. Amara soaked up every detail, trying to reconcile her memories of this place with the sophisticated life she had grown accustomed to in Monaco. Both felt real, both felt important, but they seemed to exist in completely different worlds. Ruby's house on Maple Street was exactly as Harrison had imagined from the photographs. A small, neat bungalow with a front porch swing and flower beds that showed careful attention despite limited resources. The house looked loved but modest, a stark contrast to the mansion they had left behind. It's perfect, Amara said immediately, running up the front steps to examine the swing where Ruby had told her she used to read stories to her mother. This is where Mama grew up? Right here in this house, Ruby confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. Your bedroom is the same room where she slept as a little girl. Inside, the house was small but immaculately clean, decorated with family photographs and handmade quilts that spoke of generations of love. Harrison felt enormous in the tiny living room, but he also felt something he rarely experienced in his various luxury properties: warmth. Mrs. Washington, this is beautiful, he said sincerely, examining a family photo of Ruby, her late husband, and a young Diane. You can feel the love in every room. It's not much, Ruby said apologetically, but it's been a good home to our family. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparations for the custody hearing. Harrison met with local lawyers, toured potential schools for Amara, and began the process of establishing a business office in Valdosta. Every decision was made with input from Ruby, who knew the community and could guide him toward choices that would benefit Amara's integration into local life. The real estate agent showed them the Victorian house Harrison had made an offer on, and both Ruby and Amara fell in love with it immediately. It was large enough to accommodate their unusual family structure while maintaining the charm and character that would help them feel connected to the community. The previous owners raised 6 children here, the agent explained as they toured the spacious bedrooms and large kitchen. It's been a family home for over a century. It feels happy, Amara observed, running her hand along the carved wooden banister. Like it wants children to live here. Harrison could envision their life in this house. Ruby teaching Amara to cook in the big kitchen, himself helping with homework at the dining room table, all of them reading together in the sun-filled living room. It felt possible in a way his Monaco mansion never had. The community's reaction to Harrison's presence was mixed but largely positive. Ruby's church friends were curious but welcoming, especially when they saw how devoted he was to Amara's well-being. The local business community was intrigued by the possibility of new investment and jobs from his company. People are talking, Ruby's neighbor Mrs. Johnson confided over coffee one afternoon. But they're saying good things mostly. They can see how much that man loves that little girl and how happy she is. The night before the custody hearing, Harrison found Ruby sitting on her front porch swing, staring up at stars that were much more visible here than they had been in Monaco's light-polluted sky. Second thoughts? He asked, settling into the wicker chair beside her. About 100 second thoughts, Ruby admitted. I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing. Amara could have the world at her fingertips with you. Private schools, travel, opportunities one never dreamed of. Am I holding her back by insisting she stay connected to this small town? Harrison considered his words carefully. Mrs. Washington, I've traveled the world and achieved every goal I ever set for myself. But I've never felt as content as I have these past few months watching Amara play in your backyard, listening to you tell stories about her parents, being part of something real and meaningful. But what about your business empire? Your life in Monaco? Can you really be happy here? My business will thrive wherever I am, Harrison assured her. Technology makes it possible to manage international operations from anywhere. As for Monaco. He paused, thinking of the empty mansion overlooking the Mediterranean. Monaco was where I lived, but it was never home. Home is where the people you love feel safe and happy. Ruby smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. You really mean that, don't you? I've never meant anything more in my life. The next morning dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for what they all hoped would be a new beginning. Amara wore a blue dress that Ruby had bought for the occasion, while Harrison chose a simple gray suit that wouldn't intimidate the small-town judge. At the courthouse, they met with Morrison and the local attorney Harrison had retained. The hearing would be informal by big city standards, but the judge's decision would determine the course of all their lives. Judge Sarah Patterson has been on the family court bench for 15 years, the local attorney explained. She's fair but thorough. She'll want to understand exactly how this arrangement will work practically. As they waited in the corridor outside the courtroom, Amara reached for both Ruby's hand and Harrison's, linking the three of them together. Whatever happens, she said with 8-year-old wisdom, we're a family now. Nobody can change that. Ruby squeezed her granddaughter's hand. That's right, baby girl. We're family. Harrison felt a peace settle over him that he had never experienced before a business negotiation or important meeting. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about love finding a way to overcome legal complications and social conventions. When the bailiff called their case, they walked into the courtroom together, ready to present their unconventional solution to Judge Patterson and hoping she would see what they saw. A family created by choice, bound by love, and committed to giving one little girl the best of all possible worlds. 6 months after the successful custody hearing that made Ruby Amara's legal guardian and Harrison an official part of their family structure, life in Valdosta had settled into a rhythm that none of them could have imagined. The Victorian house on Oak Street had become their home base, with Harrison splitting his time between Georgia and his international business interests. Ruby enrolled in online college courses to earn the education degree she had always dreamed of, and Amara thriving in her new school. It was at Valdosta Elementary School that Harrison first noticed Rebecca Thompson, and the moment changed everything he thought he knew about his own heart. Rebecca taught 3rd grade in a classroom decorated with bright posters and student artwork that covered every available surface. She wore a maroon dress with small white flowers, her hair pulled back in a neat bun that somehow managed to look both professional and approachable. When Harrison arrived for his weekly volunteer reading session, he found her patiently helping a struggling student sound out difficult words, her voice gentle but encouraging. Sound it out slowly, Marcus, she was saying to a boy who reminded Harrison of himself at that age, uncertain, trying hard, afraid of making mistakes. Remember what we practiced about breaking big words into smaller pieces. Harrison stood in the doorway, transfixed not just by Rebecca's beauty, which was considerable, but by her obvious love for teaching and the way every child in her classroom seemed to feel valued and important. Mr. Bennett, Amara called out when she spotted him. Come meet Miss Thompson. She's the best teacher in the whole school. Rebecca looked up with a smile that made Harrison forget every smooth line he had ever used in business negotiations. You must be Amara's guardian. She talks about you and Mrs. Washington constantly. I feel like I know you already. Harrison Bennett, he said, extending his hand and trying not to notice how perfect hers felt in his. Thank you for taking such good care of Amara. She loves your class. Amara is a joy to teach, Rebecca replied, her dark eyes sparkling with genuine affection. She's incredibly bright and asks the most thought-provoking questions. Yesterday she wanted to know why some countries have monarchies and others have democracies. Not typical 3rd grade curriculum, but we had a fascinating discussion. Harrison found himself lingering after the reading session, asking Rebecca about her teaching philosophy, her thoughts on education reform, her experiences with her students. He discovered she had grown up in nearby Tifton, earned her education degree from Valdosta State University, and had been teaching for 7 years. What brought you to elementary education? He asked as they watched the children pack up their backpacks for dismissal. I believe these early years are when we either inspire children to love learning or convince them they're not smart enough to succeed, Rebecca explained, straightening desks with efficient movements. Every child deserves at least one adult who believes in their potential completely. It was exactly the kind of answer Harrison had hoped to hear, the kind of philosophy that aligned perfectly with how he wanted Amara to be educated and nurtured. Over the following weeks, Harrison found excuses to spend more time at the school. He volunteered for field trip supervision, donated books to the classroom library, and somehow always managed to arrive a few minutes early for pickup so he could chat with Rebecca about Amara's progress. Ruby noticed the change in Harrison immediately. "You've been unusually cheerful lately," she observed one evening as they prepared dinner together in their spacious kitchen. "And you've been very interested in Amara's schoolwork." "I think education is important," Harrison replied, trying to sound casual while he helped Ruby snap green beans. "Ah. And I suppose this sudden interest in education has nothing to do with Miss Thompson." Harrison nearly dropped the colander he was holding. "I don't know what you mean." Ruby laughed, the sound rich and knowing. "Harrison Bennett, I may be 68 years old, but I know what a smitten man looks like. You light up like Christmas morning every time someone mentions that teacher." Amara skipped into the kitchen at that moment, home from her after-school art program. "Are we talking about Miss Thompson? I think Mr. Harrison likes her. He gets all smiley when she talks to him." "Amara," Harrison protested, but he was smiling even as he said it. "It's okay, Mr. Harrison. Miss Thompson is really pretty and really nice. If you married her, she could be my stepmom and my teacher. That would be perfect." Ruby and Harrison exchanged glances across the kitchen island. Neither had expected 8-year-old matchmaking to be part of their family dynamic. "Sweetheart," Ruby said gently, "grown-up relationships are more complicated than that. We can't just decide we want someone to be part of our family." "Why not?" Amara asked with the directness of childhood. "We decided we wanted to be a family and that worked out great." The Halloween festival at school provided Harrison with the perfect opportunity to spend more time with Rebecca outside the formal classroom environment. He volunteered to help with the haunted house, which meant working closely with her to transform the gymnasium into a spooky maze for the children. "You're surprisingly good at this," Rebecca observed as Harrison carefully arranged fake spider webs around a cardboard tombstone. "Most business executives I know wouldn't be caught dead stringing Halloween decorations." "Most business executives don't have 8-year-old daughters who inform them that helping with school events is mandatory for good fathers," Harrison replied, adjusting the tombstone's position. Rebecca paused in her painting of a haunted tree backdrop. "Amara is lucky to have found you and Mrs. Washington. Foster children don't always land in situations where they're so obviously cherished." "We're the lucky ones," Harrison said seriously. "Amara changed our lives in ways we never expected." As they worked together, their conversation flowed naturally from school topics to personal interests, shared values, and dreams for the future. Harrison learned that Rebecca had been engaged once but called off the wedding when she realized her fiancé expected her to quit teaching after they married. He shared his own history of failed relationships with women who were more interested in his wealth than his character. "That must make it difficult to trust people's motives," Rebecca said thoughtfully. "It did," Harrison admitted. "Until I moved here and discovered what it felt like to be valued for who I am rather than what I own." The evening of the festival, Harrison watched Rebecca interact with students and parents, noticing how naturally she connected with everyone from shy kindergartners to intimidating football dads. She wore a green dress that brought out the warm tones in her skin, and when she laughed at something one of the children said, Harrison felt his chest tighten with emotion he hadn't experienced since he was a teenager. "You're staring," Ruby said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of apple cider. "Was I being obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Harrison accepted the cider gratefully. "I don't know. It's complicated. What if she's not interested? What if dating me would make things awkward for Amara at school? What if she thinks I'm just another wealthy guy looking for entertainment? What if she thinks you're a kind, intelligent man who would treat her with respect and love?" Ruby countered. "What if she's been hoping you'd ask her out for weeks now? Has she said something to you?" Ruby smiled mysteriously. "Women talk, Harrison. And Rebecca Thompson has been asking a lot of questions about your character, your intentions regarding Amara, and whether you're seeing anyone." Hope bloomed in Harrison's chest like a flower opening to sunlight. "Really? Really? Now stop overthinking this and go ask that lovely woman to dinner before some other smart man beats you to it." Harrison found Rebecca at the face painting booth, transforming a giggling first grader into a butterfly. He waited until she finished before approaching, his heart beating faster than it had during any business negotiation. "Rebecca," he began, then stopped and tried again. "Miss Thompson. Rebecca. I was wondering if..." Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Nothing fancy, maybe just dinner and conversation? Rebecca's smile was radiant. I would love that, Harrison. I've been hoping you'd ask. From across the gymnasium, Ruby and Amara watched the exchange with satisfaction. Love, it seemed, had a way of finding the most unexpected solutions to life's complications. Think they'll get married? Amara asked hopefully. I think, Ruby replied, that some things are worth waiting to see unfold naturally. But privately, watching Harrison's face light up as Rebecca said yes to their first date, Ruby was already planning a wedding in her mind. 3 months into Harrison and Rebecca's courtship, their carefully balanced world faced its first major crisis. Harrison's primary business partner in Asia, a man who controlled 30% of the company's international operations, suffered a massive heart attack and died unexpectedly. Within hours, Harrison was facing the potential collapse of business relationships that had taken 15 years to build. I have to fly to Singapore immediately, Harrison explained to Ruby and Amara over breakfast, his phone buzzing constantly with calls from lawyers, accountants, and business managers across 3 continents. The situation is critical. If I don't get there within 48 hours to meet with our partners personally, we could lose contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Amara looked up from her cereal with worried eyes. How long will you be gone? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe a week, maybe longer. It depends on how complicated the legal issues become. Ruby studied Harrison's face, recognizing the stress lines around his eyes. What can we do to help? Just keep everything stable here. I'll handle the business crisis, but I need to know you and Amara are okay. What Harrison didn't anticipate was how much this separation would test not just his relationship with Rebecca, but the entire foundation of their unconventional family structure. The first week stretched into 2, then 3. Harrison called daily, but the conversations were rushed and interrupted by urgent business matters. He missed Amara's school play, where she played a pioneer woman in the 3rd grade's production of The American Journey. He missed Ruby's graduation from her online college program, where she finally earned the bachelor's degree she had dreamed of since she was 18. He missed the first time Rebecca said, "I love you," to him over a crackling international phone connection that made her words seem distant and uncertain. I feel like we're losing him, Ruby confided to Rebecca one evening as they sat on the front porch swing, watching Amara play with Winston in the backyard. Not permanently, but the business world is pulling him back into that life where relationships take second place to deals. Rebecca had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it from Ruby made her fears feel more real. Maybe this is who he really is. Maybe the past few months in Valdosta were just a vacation from his real life. Do you believe that? Rebecca considered the question carefully. My heart doesn't believe it. But my head keeps reminding me that I've only known him for a few months. What if the kind, family-centered man I fell in love with was just a temporary version of himself? Their conversation was interrupted by Amara running up the porch steps, her face flushed from playing. Is Mr. Harrison coming home tomorrow? He promised to help me with my science project about ocean ecosystems. Ruby and Rebecca exchanged glances. They had been fielding similar questions from Amara all week, trying to maintain her faith in Harrison while dealing with their own doubts. He's still working on important business, baby girl, Ruby said gently. But he'll be home as soon as he can. The real test came during the 4th week of Harrison's absence. Amara developed a fever that spiked to 104 degrees in the middle of the night. Ruby rushed her to the emergency room, where doctors discovered she had a severe ear infection that required immediate treatment and overnight observation. Rebecca arrived at the hospital within minutes of Ruby's call, still in her pajamas but carrying a bag of Amara's favorite books and stuffed animals. They took turns holding Amara's hand as she dozed fitfully between doses of antibiotics and pain medication. Should we call Harrison? Rebecca asked quietly around 3 in the morning. It's the middle of a business day in Singapore, Ruby replied, checking her watch. He's probably in important meetings. But as the hours passed and Amara's fever remained high, they both felt Harrison's absence more acutely. This was what family meant. Being present during the crises, holding hands in hospital waiting rooms, making medical decisions together. When Harrison finally called during his regular evening check-in, 12 hours after Amara had been admitted to the hospital, the conversation was difficult. Why didn't you call me immediately? He demanded, his voice tight with worry and guilt. I should have been there. We handled it, Ruby replied, exhaustion making her voice sharper than usual. Rebecca and I took care of everything. Amara is fine now, fever is down, infection is responding to antibiotics. I'm booking the next flight home. Harrison, you don't need to. Ruby began then stopped. Maybe they did need him to come home. Maybe his presence during this crisis was exactly what their family required. But Harrison's return flight was delayed by a typhoon, then cancelled entirely due to mechanical problems. By the time he finally arrived in Valdosta, Amara had been home from the hospital for 3 days and was back to her usual energetic self. "Mr. Harrison," she said, launching herself into his arms when he walked through the front door. "I missed you so much. Grandma Ruby and Miss Rebecca took really good care of me when I was sick, but I wanted you to be there too." Harrison held her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo and feeling the solid weight of her healthy body against his chest. "I'm sorry I wasn't here, sweetheart. I should have been here." "You're here now," Amara said simply. "That's what matters." But the adults were not so quick to forgive and forget. That evening, after Amara was asleep, Harrison faced a difficult conversation with both Ruby and Rebecca. "I feel like I failed you," he began, sitting across from them in the living room. "The whole reason I moved here was to be present for this family, and when you needed me most, I was 8,000 miles away." "The business crisis wasn't your fault," Rebecca said fairly. "You couldn't have predicted your partner's death or the legal complications. But I could have handled it differently. I could have sent other executives to manage the situation instead of going myself. I could have insisted on scheduled times to be unreachable for family emergencies. I let myself get pulled back into old patterns." Ruby leaned forward in her chair. "Harrison, we need to talk about what this means for our future. Amara is getting attached to the idea of you as her father figure. I'm growing dependent on having you here as my co-parent. Rebecca is falling in love with you. But if your business is going to require these kinds of extended absences regularly..." "It won't," Harrison said firmly. "I've spent the last month restructuring everything. I'm promoting 2 senior executives to handle Asian operations, hiring additional staff in Singapore, and establishing protocols so that I never have to be out of the country for more than 72 hours at a time." Rebecca studied his face. "You're really willing to change your entire business model to be here with us?" "Rebecca, 3 months ago I thought success meant building a bigger empire, closing more deals, accumulating more wealth. But when I was sitting in that Singapore hotel room, knowing that Amara was sick and scared and I wasn't there to comfort her, I realized I had my priorities completely wrong." He reached for Rebecca's hand. "I love you. I love this family we've created. I love the life we're building together. No business deal is worth risking that." Ruby smiled through tears. She didn't realize she was crying. "So what happens now? Now I prove that I meant every word. I show you both that family comes first, always. I show Amara that the people who love her will never let her down again." Rebecca squeezed Harrison's hand. "I love you too. All of you. This crazy, wonderful, impossible family we've somehow created." Outside, a Georgia thunderstorm was beginning, the kind that would water Ruby's garden and fill the old house with the sound of rain on the roof. Inside, 3 adults who had found their way to each other against all odds were planning a future built on love, trust, and the hard-won knowledge that family is something you create through commitment, not something you're simply born into. Upstairs, Amara slept peacefully in her bedroom that had once belonged to her mother, dreaming of science projects and wedding dresses and all the ways love could surprise you when you least expected it. The morning of Harrison and Rebecca's wedding dawned clear and warm, with the kind of perfect Georgia sunshine that made everything look like it was lit from within. Ruby stood at the kitchen window, watching Harrison and Amara hang white ribbons from the oak trees in their backyard, their laughter carrying through the open window. "Hard to believe it's only been 18 months since you found that little girl outside your mansion," Ruby said when Harrison came inside for a glass of water. Harrison paused, towel in hand, considering how completely his life had changed. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like she's always been part of my life. And now you're getting married in our backyard to her favorite teacher," Ruby added with a smile. "If this was a movie, people would say it was too perfect to be believable." "Mrs. Washington," Harrison said formally, then grinned. "Ruby, I need to ask you something important." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "At 9 in the morning on your wedding day? This should be interesting." Harrison sat down at the kitchen table where they had shared hundreds of meals and conversations over the past year. "I want to officially adopt Amara after Rebecca and I are married. I want her to be legally mine as well as yours. I want to be her father on paper the way I already am in my heart." Ruby felt tears well up in her eyes. "Harrison, you don't need a piece of paper to be that child's father. You've been her daddy since the night you brought her inside your house." "I know. But I want it to be official. I want her to have my name if she wants it. I want to have the legal right to make decisions about her education, her healthcare, her future. I want the world to know she belongs to me." And what does Amara think about this idea? Harrison's smile grew wider. She asked me to propose it to you. Apparently, she's been hoping I would bring it up. Ruby laughed, wiping her eyes with her apron. That child has been planning this family better than any of us adults. Yes, Harrison. Yes, I think it would be wonderful for you to adopt her officially. 2 hours later, Ruby was helping Rebecca get ready in the main bedroom of their Victorian house. Rebecca's wedding dress was simple but elegant, a cream-colored creation that complemented her skin tone perfectly. Her hair was arranged in an updo decorated with small white flowers that Amara had insisted on picking from the garden. Nervous? Ruby asked, adjusting the pearl necklace that had belonged to Rebecca's grandmother. Terrified, Rebecca admitted. Not about marrying Harrison, but about becoming an instant mother to Amara. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't fill the role she needs? Ruby took Rebecca's hands in hers. Sweetheart, you've been mothering that child since the day she entered your classroom. She adores you, trusts you, and looks to you for guidance already. The only thing changing today is that it becomes official. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Miss Rebecca? Are you ready? The people are starting to arrive. Amara peeked around the door, wearing a soft yellow dress that made her look like a ray of sunshine. Her hair was arranged in curls, and she carried a basket of rose petals for her role as flower girl. You look beautiful, Rebecca said, kneeling down to hug her future stepdaughter. Are you excited about the wedding? I'm excited about everything, Amara replied honestly. The wedding, and you becoming my mom, and Mr. Harrison becoming my official dad, and all of us being a real family forever. Rebecca felt her heart swell with love for this remarkable child who had brought them all together. We already are a real family, sweetheart. The wedding just makes it legal. The backyard had been transformed into a fairy tale setting. White chairs arranged in neat rows faced an arch of flowering vines where Harrison waited with the minister from Ruby's church. Guests from both Rebecca's and Harrison's worlds mingled on the lawn. Rebecca's teaching colleagues chatting with Harrison's business associates, Ruby's church friends admiring the elegant decorations, children from Amara's class playing quietly near the garden. As the ceremony began, Ruby took her seat in the front row, watching three people she loved more than life itself promise to build a future together. Harrison looked handsome in his navy suit, but more importantly, he looked happy in a way she had never seen him before meeting Amara. Rebecca was radiant in her wedding dress, but her smile was brightest when she looked at Amara, who was carefully scattering rose petals down the aisle with serious concentration. The minister spoke about love, commitment, and the different ways families are formed. He acknowledged that this wedding was about more than just two people promising to love each other. It was about officially creating a family unit that already existed in their hearts. Do you, Harrison, take Rebecca to be your wife, and do you promise to love and cherish not only her, but the daughter you will gain through this union? I do, Harrison said clearly, his eyes moving from Rebecca to Amara. I promise to love you both with everything I have. Do you, Rebecca, take Harrison to be your husband, and do you promise to be a loving mother to Amara, helping to guide her and support her as she grows? I do, Rebecca replied, her voice strong and sure. I promise to love this family we're creating and to do everything I can to help Amara become the amazing woman I know she'll be. Just as the minister was about to pronounce them husband and wife, a commotion at the back of the garden caught everyone's attention. A man in his 30s, tall and lean with the same dark eyes as Amara, stood at the garden gate looking uncertain and hopeful. Ruby gasped, recognizing him immediately from family photographs. James? James Washington? The wedding guests turned in confusion as Ruby stood up, her hand pressed to her heart. Amara looked from her grandmother to the stranger, something familiar about his face but not quite able to place him. I'm sorry to interrupt, the man said, his voice carrying across the quiet garden. I know this is your special day, but I had to come. I've been searching for my daughter for 3 years. Harrison felt the bottom drop out of his world. Amara's father? Alive? How was this possible? Daddy? Amara whispered, the word carrying across the silent gathering like a prayer. James Washington stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. Hello, baby girl. I've been looking for you everywhere. The wedding guests sat in stunned silence as 3 years of pain, loss, and desperate searching culminated in this impossible moment. Amara stood frozen between her biological father and the family she had chosen, unsure whether to run toward him or stay where she felt safe. Harrison's first instinct was to step protectively in front of Amara, to shield her from this disruption to their carefully constructed life. But then he saw the expression on her face, not fear but recognition. Not confusion, but a desperate hope she had been afraid to acknowledge. "How?" Ruby managed to ask. "We were told you died in the car accident with Diane." James wiped his eyes, struggling to compose himself. "I was thrown from the car. I was in a coma for 6 months, then had amnesia for almost a year after that. When I finally remembered who I was and came looking for Amara, the system told me she had been placed in foster care but wouldn't tell me where. I've been searching ever since." Rebecca reached for Harrison's hand, both of them recognizing that their perfect moment was about to become infinitely more complicated. Amara took a tentative step toward her father, then looked back at Harrison and Rebecca. "Is it really you, Daddy? Are you really alive?" "It's really me, sweetheart. I never stopped looking for you. I never stopped loving you." What happened next surprised everyone, including Amara herself. Instead of running into her father's arms, she walked over to Harrison and took his hand, then reached for Rebecca's hand with her other one. "Daddy James," she said, using the name she had called him when she was small, "I want you to meet my family. This is my daddy Harrison who saved me when I was scared and alone. This is my mom Rebecca who teaches me every day. And this is my grandma Ruby who never stopped loving me." James Washington looked at the people who had cared for his daughter, recognizing immediately that they weren't just temporary guardians but a real family who loved Amara completely. "I can see how much you love her," he said to Harrison and Rebecca. "I can see how happy and healthy she is. I don't want to disrupt something so beautiful." Harrison surprised himself by stepping forward and extending his hand to James. "She's your daughter. She loves you. There's room in this family for all of us if you want there to be." Rebecca nodded, her eyes bright with tears. "Amara has enough love for everyone. The question is whether we adults are mature enough to share." Ruby was already moving toward James, her arms open for the son-in-law she thought she had lost forever. "Welcome home," she said simply. As James embraced his former mother-in-law, then knelt down to properly hug the daughter he had never stopped searching for, the wedding guests began to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary. A family expanding to include everyone who belonged, regardless of biology or law or social convention. "So," the minister said gently, "shall we continue with the ceremony? It seems this family is about to get even bigger." And so Harrison Bennett married Rebecca Thompson in their backyard in Valdosta, Georgia, with Amara as their flower girl and James Washington standing beside Ruby in the front row, all of them understanding that love doesn't divide when it's shared, it multiplies. Later, as the reception continued into the evening with dancing and cake and the joyful chaos of a community celebration, Amara found herself surrounded by 4 adults who all loved her completely. Her grandmother who had never given up hope, her biological father who had searched for 3 years to find her, her adoptive father who had given her a home when she was desperate, and her stepmother who would guide her through childhood with wisdom and patience. "Am I the luckiest kid in the world or what?" she asked Harrison as they swayed to the music, her small feet balanced on his shoes the way he had taught her months ago. "We're all the luckiest people in the world," Harrison replied, looking around at their extraordinary family. "We found each other against impossible odds." As the Georgia stars came out over their celebration, 5 people who had been lost in different ways discovered that home isn't a place you're born into, but a feeling you create with the people brave enough to choose love over fear, inclusion over exclusion, and hope over everything else that threatens to keep hearts apart. And in the morning, they would wake up as the most unconventional, loving, impossibly perfect family that Valdosta, Georgia had ever seen.